Empress Dowager Cixi's tomb was looted. She died in 1908 and was laid to rest in Dingdongling, the highest-ranking tomb in the Eastern Qing tombs. This was no ordinary Empress Dowager's tomb. In terms of size and design, it went far beyond what any Empress Dowager had ever been entitled to. It was more like the tomb of a ruler who had truly held the reins of power. During her life, vast wealth accumulated around her personal court. After her death, none of it disappeared. It remained perfectly intact, sealed beneath the ground. According to Qing court regulations and later historical records, the burial objects were staggering in number. Gold, silver, jade, gemstones, and tribute items were all carefully catalogued, sorted and packed into more than 40 chests filled with treasures. This wasn't a symbolic burial. It was a deliberate freezing of fortune. In a sense, it was a national treasury, sealed away underground. 20 years later, China had plunged into the chaos of warlord conflicts. The national treasury buried underground remained unclaimed by any new authority. The imperial throne still existed in name, but its actual control over the tombs had vanished. On July 4, 1928, Sun Dianying led his troops into the Malinyu area, home of the Eastern Qing tombs. Claiming it as a military operation, he sealed off the area, cutting off all outside interference entirely. Then his men used explosives. Late at night, the blast tore open the entrance to Dingdongling's underground chamber. When the soldiers entered, what they saw was not decay or destruction, but a carefully maintained order. The coffin sat at the center, surrounded by jade, gold, and gemstones, all arranged according to the hierarchy Cixi had observed in life. This was no ordinary tomb. It had become a core of wealth laid bare in a power vacuum. Here, being sealed no longer meant security. It only meant waiting. Sun Dianying was no longer just a military commander. He was the one who set the plunder in motion. The underground chamber was then fully breached. Once inside, the soldiers did not encounter a single corpse, but an entire system of wealth, largely intact. Around Cixi's coffin, treasures were arranged according to imperial rank and ritual order. Jade, gold, and gemstones were placed in rows. Chests were stacked layer upon layer. The most striking object was the luminous pearl placed in her mouth. When separated, it appeared dull. When brought together, it emitted a faint green glow. Records claimed that at night it could illuminate individual strands of hair from over 100 paces away. To retrieve it, the soldiers pried open Cixi's jaw. Her body was covered with a gold-threaded brocade cover, embroidered with pearls and gemstones. At her feet lay lotus flowers carved from tourmaline. Beside the coffin stood a pair of jade ornaments, green on the surface and veined with red, resembling freshly cut fruit. They were not everyday objects. They were rare tributes from foreign regions, long stored within the imperial system. And it didn't stop there. Coral trees, jade lotus sculptures, ivory carvings, and calligraphy were packed into more than 40 chests. Many still bore the stamp of the imperial household department, indicating their origin within the state treasury rather than private ownership. The looting was not chaotic. It was selective. Small, high-value objects that were easy to carry and easily exchanged were taken first. The luminous pearl was kept separately, later used as political currency, and eventually entered overseas private collections, disappearing from public view. Jade ornaments, tourmaline lotus pieces, and court beads were taken out in batches. Some became personal gifts. Others were smuggled into underground and international markets. One object carried exceptional symbolic weight: the nine-dragon sword. Originally buried with the Qianlong Emperor, the blade was decorated with 9 golden dragons and inlaid gemstones, representing imperial authority itself. During years of war and power shifts, the sword changed hands repeatedly before vanishing amid plane crashes and conflict. No physical trace remains, only rumor. Larger items that could not be quickly processed were temporarily abandoned or dismantled. Over time, they entered black markets and overseas collections. Some have never resurfaced. By the time the looting ended, Cixi's body had been completely desecrated. The coffin was split open. Her corpse was dragged out and left face down on the cold stone floor. Her burial garments were stripped away. The pearl was forcibly removed from her mouth. Even the protective arrangements beneath the coffin, meant to safeguard the tomb, were removed. This was not accidental destruction. it was total clearance. Shortly afterward, Sun Dayaning's troops entered the Yuling tomb of the Qianlong emperor. The underground palace was blown open. The coffin was destroyed. Bones were scattered across the chamber. According to contemporary accounts, only one set of skeletal remains was left relatively intact. By then, the two most symbolically important royal tombs of the Qing dynasty had been thoroughly stripped. When reports of the looting of Cixi's tomb began to circulate, public outrage spread rapidly. In 1928, national newspapers including Shenbao and Ta Kung Pao published consecutive editorials openly naming Sun Dayaning. They accused him of digging graves and desecrating corpses, an act that annihilated all moral boundaries. Several commentaries framed the incident not as ordinary grave robbery, but as the complete destruction of the Qing imperial tomb system itself. These reports circulated widely in Beijing, Tianjin, Shanghai, and other major cities. The most intense reaction came from the Qing imperial family. Upon hearing the news, Piru reportedly collapsed to the ground in tears and declared, "If this crime is not avenged, I will no longer claim the Eisenjoro name." Shortly afterward, former officials of the Qing court jointly submitted a formal report to the nationalist government, titled Account of the Looting of the Eastern Qing Tombs. The document listed the categories and quantities of the stolen burial objects in detail and demanded a formal investigation, along with accountability for those responsible. Meanwhile, the destinations of several looted items began to emerge. The luminous pearl was delivered to Song Miling. The jadeite watermelon and the nine-dragon sword entered Chiang Kai-shek's personal network. Tourmaline lotus pieces and portions of the court bead sets were transferred to Sung Si-ven. Dai Li oversaw the logistics, handling the delivery, coordination, and concealment of key details. These objects never appeared as evidence in any investigation. Instead, they were absorbed into private political and personal networks. As this process unfolded, the direction of the investigation was repeatedly delayed and redirected. In the end, the nationalist government concluded the case by charging Sun Dayaning only with misappropriation while on duty, classified as a minor violation. The final decision avoided any formal acknowledgement of responsibility for the looting of the imperial tombs themselves. The former imperial house's petitions were dismissed. Public attention gradually faded, and the case was closed at the administrative level. Sun Dayaning was neither dismissed nor criminally prosecuted. On the contrary, he was soon formally incorporated into the existing military structure and continued to serve within it. The investigation into the looting of the Eastern Qing tombs remained confined to administrative procedure and never advanced into formal accountability. As public attention faded, the Eastern Qing tombs incident quickly disappeared from public discussion. Sun Dayaning's name faded from the center of the controversy. He was formally absorbed into the existing military system and continued to serve as a recognized commander. The looting of imperial tombs did not end his career, nor did it produce any enforceable accountability at the institutional level. In the years that followed, Sun Dayaning shifted among different political and military factions, adjusting his position as circumstances shifted. His name was no longer directly linked to the Eastern Qing tombs. Instead, he was gradually recast as a local armed figure. Questions surrounding the tombs, the artifacts, and responsibility were deliberately avoided in official records and public narratives. After the Eastern Qing tombs incident, imperial tombs were no longer treated as untouchable symbols of the state. For the first time, burial objects were transformed on a large, systematic scale into political currency. Within power networks, they were redistributed and absorbed. They no longer needed to pass through judicial procedures or leave any public records. Through private relationships, they were taken in, consumed, and quietly vanished from view. From this moment on, these objects no longer belonged to their original history. They belonged neither to a dynasty nor to collective memory. They became resources that could circulate, be exchanged, and be handled without explanation. Their destinations no longer mattered. What mattered was that they no longer needed to be explained. The Eastern Qing tombs were not the beginning of China's cultural heritage loss, but they marked a clear turning point. They showed that when order collapses, destruction does not necessarily carry consequences. When power reaches tacit agreement, history itself can be bypassed. Sun Dayaning merely pulled the trigger. What truly made it possible was an era that could no longer return to order. The moment the Eastern Qing tombs were opened, what lost control was not only two imperial graves,